Hello and welcome to SRIRAM's IAS. You are most welcomed into this series in which we are discussing the economy from basics to advance. Now, the topic which we have picked today is the paradox of thrift. Now, what do we call thriftness or thrift in the economy is basically the propensity or the probability to do something more. That is very simple. That in economy you might have heard of the concepts like GDP or GNP or NNP or somewhat more concepts like this. But the problem here is that these all concepts which we use to measure the output of economy are per se ex post measures. That is, whatever happens in economy, we just measure it once it is done. But in economy, in macroeconomics, what we have to learn is something more. That is, what is there to be planned and what has been planned, is market actually working according to that? कि क्या उस फर्म ने जो सोचा होगा आज से एक साल पहले, जो फर्म वाटर बॉटल बनाती है, जो फर्म एसी बनाती है, जो फर्म गाड़ियां बनाती है, जो कोई इंडस्ट्री मोबाइल फोन्स बनाती है, क्या उस इंडस्ट्री ने ये जो डिमांड सोची थी एंड जो उसने सप्लाई सोची थी दैट इट विल प्रोड्यूस दिस मच अमाउंट ऑफ प्रोडक्ट्स इन द मार्केट, इट विल सप्लाई दिस मच अमाउंट ऑफ प्रोडक्ट्स इन द मार्केट because the consumers will be having this much of demand in the market in the upcoming year. This demand and supply is known as ex ante measures. We call it ex ante demand or ex ante measures or ex ante supply. Now, in the macroeconomics, you might have heard of the concept that is equilibrium also. Equilibrium was very simple. When we talked about macroeconomics, when we learned about the concept of market equilibrium, which we have discussed in this series only, that macroeconomics mein equilibrium says that when the supply and demand, they match at a particular point in the market and are actually balanced by the concept of invisible hand. Now, जब हमने ये सारी चीज़ें पढ़ी थी, तब हमने ये भी सोचा था that जब मार्केट में एक पर्टिकुलर प्राइस पे सारे कंज्यूमर आके एक पर्टिकुलर गुड की डिमांड रखेंगे, वो डिमांड और उसकी सप्लाई मैच करेगी, तो देन ओनली विल बी दिस इक्विलिब्रियम फॉर्म्ड. दैट वाज मार्केट इक्विलिब्रियम. एंड हियर वी फाउंड थ्री थिंग्स. व्हाट वाज दैट? One was the price of equilibrium, one was the quantity demanded on this equilibrium, and another was the quantity supplied. ठीक है? That was one equilibrium. Another equilibrium in economy is that when this ex ante demand and ex ante supply will meet each other. Now, how will this happen? How will this happen? There is basically a simple concept behind it, and the concept is of income. Because everyone in economy is working for this income. Whether we talk about profit of the firms, whether we talk about rent of the land, we talk about wages of labor, or we talk about the profit which is earned by the firms. Now, all of this talks about the factors of production. Now, these factors of production, they generate income for everyone who is implanting them, who is utilizing these factors of production. Now, you need to understand one more thing, that whenever a person is getting income, what he is going to do with this income? He'll do two things. One, he can go for savings, or the same person can do also consumption. Consumption, or we can say expenditure. These are the two basic things what a person is going to do with the economy when the income comes to his hands. Now, the problem here is that which one is more important and which one should be promoted. The point here is that if a person starts saving, that is why we introduced the banking sector in a 5-sector model economy. The banking sector helps us to turn these savings into investment. Very simple concept, that is that whenever a person saves, a sum of income. For example, a person saves 100 rupees, he will save this money into a bank, and this money will be turned into a loan, and this loan will be disbursed to a person who has started his entrepreneurial, I can say venture or a firm. Then he will turn this into investment, and this investment will lead to more productivity and more production in economy. That is how it will lead to growth of the economy. Very basic understanding. Now this paradox of thrift, or we can say the saving investment paradox, ठीक है, the diamond paradox leads to a simple concept. अब हम इस चीज़ को कैसे डिकोड करेंगे? इसको समझना ऐसे है that if a person, अगर किसी इंसान की इनकम बढ़ती है, if the income of a person increases, his intensity or his intentions to save will also increase, and his intentions to consume will also increase. That is, एक person, एक इंसान, कोई भी इंसान XYZ, अगर उसकी इनकम बढ़ती है तो वो शायद अपना स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग इंक्रीज करेगा, वो शायद अपनी सेविंग्स बढ़ाएगा. क्यों सेविंग्स बढ़ाएगा? क्योंकि वो कल को ये सोचेगा कि मैं इन सेविंग्स को बैंक में रखता हूँ क्योंकि मेरे पास पैसे ज़्यादा है और उसी पे मैं इंटरेस्ट कमा लेता हूँ. या फिर वो इन्हीं सेविंग्स को डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्ट करेगा किसी बिजनेस के अंदर, स्टॉक्स में, शेयर्स में, कहीं पे भी इन्वेस्ट कर सकता है. नाउ द प्रॉब्लम हियर इज दैट इफ द सेविंग्स आर इंक्रीजिंग एंड कंजप्शन इज इंक्रीजिंग, दैट इज विद द इंक्रीज इन इकोनॉमी वी डिराइव हियर टू कॉन्सेप्ट्स. वन इज that with the increase in income in an economy, there are two things which will be increasing. One is the marginal propensity to save, and another is marginal propensity to consume. बहुत सिंपल सी बात है, ठीक है, that both the things will increase. Now the point here is that we need to learn that if there is investment in the economy, if there is investment in the economy, this only will ensure that there is production in the economy, and if investment is increasing, it will eventually lead to demand. Why? Because a person, मैंने क्या बोला था, एक फर्म जब अपना वेंचर स्टार्ट करती है तो वो क्यों स्टार्ट करती है, वो प्रोडक्शन क्यों करती है? बिकॉज दे हैव अ सर्टन सेट ऑफ पैराडाइम एट देयर हेड. वो क्या है, प्लानिंग क्या करती है बिजनेस, कि आगे आने वाले टाइम में देयर विल बी एक्स एंटी डिमांड. दैट इज दे हैव प्लान्ड दैट देयर विल बी डिमांड, सो दैट वी विल बी सप्लाइंग दिस प्रोडक्ट इन द मार्केट. दैट इज हाउ मार्केट वर्क्स इन द लॉन्ग रन. Now you need to understand one more thing, that is how this investment will lead to demand in the market. Simple, ex ante demand. But there is a problem with this equilibrium, that is the savings, investment and the supply in the market. These three things have to be in the equilibrium, are supposed to be in the equilibrium. Otherwise what will happen is savings increase करने के साथ साथ investment increase हो रही है, but the demand here in the market has to be there. If there is no demand, there won't be growth in the economy. Now यहाँ तक हमें समझ में आ गया that income increase होने से दो चीजें होंगी, savings increase होंगी और consumption increase हो सकता है. But remember one more thing, that if the savings are increasing, consumption will be decreasing, because a person who has just 100 rupees has got 100 more rupees in terms of income. How will this happen? Now, अगर किसी इंसान को 100 रुपये एक्स्ट्रा मिल रहा है, why is he getting 100 rupees? ठीक है, understand this. A person, इसकी जो इनकम बढ़ रही है, suppose a person was earning just 1000 rupees I can say in salary, ठीक है. Now his income has increased by 100 rupees. Now, once his income has increased by 100 rupees, maybe he will utilize this and consume 50 more. Whatever he was consuming, that was 500. He was consuming 500 rupees. Now he will consume 550 rupees. Now this will create additional demand in the market. This will create additional demand in the market. Once this additional demand is created, this will help firms, and this will lead firms to produce more. Once they produce more, they need investment for this also. But yes, how will they get the investment? They will get the investment from savings. Clear yahan tak? Now, this 50% of income which has increased, this 100 rupees which has increased and has increased the expenditure or the consumption by just 50 rupees will have multiple effect on the macroeconomy. Multiple times more effect in the macroeconomy. Why so? Understand it. Just a demand of 50 rupees more will need firms to invest more and produce more. These firms, once they get loans from the economy, from the banks, once they get loans from the banks, they will increase their productivity, and the final output in the economy will be multiple times more than what has been initial increase in the consumption. So therefore, the increase, remember this, the multiplier effect in investment, says that the increase in total output divided by the initial increase in consumption. That is, how much increase has there been at the macro level in the economy by just a minor increase in the consumption. Because this consumption will go through multiple stages and it will have a multiplier effect on this economy. Understood? This is investment multiplier effect. Once we understand this, there is one more concept which we need to understand before we go to savings. Because now we witnessed that income will lead to more consumption, and increased consumption will lead to increased demand. Increased demand will lead to increased output. Once we set this paradigm, once we set this ground, now we need to see about savings. Now, understand this. The paradox of thrift says that if the savings in economy are increasing and everyone is saving more. Suppose everyone in an economy saves 10 more rupees in the economy. हर एक इंसान अगर सेव ज़्यादा कर रहा है तो क्या होगा? Understand, their immediate effect will be that उसका consumption will decrease, because either you can save from the 100 rupees or you can decrease or you can consume from the 100 rupees. Either you can utilize 100 rupees or the 50 rupees from consumption, or you can utilize them in consumption, or you can save them for your investment. There are only two ways to do this. But yes, the paradox says that if a person is increasing his savings, it will lead to less consumption, and less consumption will lead to less demand in the market. And if there is less demand in the market, there will be less production in the market and there will be less growth in the market. That is how the paradox of savings says that there will be a multiplier effect in the reduction of consumption. Multiplier effect in the reduction of consumption, that is the initial amount of consumption which was decreased, the initial amount of, that is decrease in the total output of economy divided by decrease in the initial consumption. This is the multiplier effect of decrease in consumption. In investment, we saw that if the income of a person is increasing, it will lead to increase in more expenditure. That is, he will consume more. This increase in expenditure or increase in autonomous expenditure will lead to what? If there is increase in autonomous expenditure, this will lead to increase in total output of the economy. And if there is increase in total output of economy, this means that this is the formula for what? For multiplier effect of increase in the autonomous expenditure on the macro economy. Now let's simplify it more. The simplification will be very simple. I'll just make it very simple for you to understand and revise the concept more. As we said that income, increase in income, the person who has got an increase in income, if a person's income is increasing, if a person in the economy is earning more, if the factors of production are earning more, if the rent of the land is increasing, if the wages of the labor are increasing, if there is increase in economy, increase in income, this increase in income will lead to two things. Either there will be expenditure or there will be savings. These savings will lead to investment. That more savings, more investment. Why? Because more people save in the economy, that savings will be led to investment. That savings will be converted into investment by the firms. Now, if there is increase in expenditure, if a person is consuming more goods, he is creating demand in the market. This demand will lead firms to invest more and produce more. That means the total economic output is increasing. Now, how much increase has there been in expenditure and how much total output of economy has increased? That is the multiplier effect of consumption. Again, in the savings and investment, how much income has increased, and how much autonomous expenditure has increased and led to increase in the total equilibrium output of the economy. That is the multiplier effect. Simple. Now, after this, we need to understand the savings. The savings paradox says that if large population, if all the people in an economy start to save more, if they start to increase their savings, what will happen eventually is that they will be left with less money to consume. Consumption will decrease, and there will be one more thing, that if everyone is saving in the economy, this will lead to more thriftness in the economy. The thriftness will increase. If the thriftness is increasing, this will lead to less consumption, and this will lead to less demand in the economy. And if there is less demand in the economy, the national income or the national output will also decrease in the economy. That is how you need to understand that India once was facing this dilemma, that whether to promote more savings, because more savings will lead to more investment, and that is why we were focusing on financial inclusion more and more. That is taking the larger net of the population under the banking, and that is why UPSC also asked two questions. One was asked in prelims, that is how do you understand and what should we do for multiplier effect? Okay? That how or what is multiplier effect and how will the economy grow more in terms of banking and all? There should be habit of people for banking which should be increasing in nature. One is that. Second most important thing which was asked was the saving and investment paradox. That what should we promote? Should we promote more savings, and eventually will they lead to investment or not? That is a concept in which there lies the monetary policy transmission. That if the people are saving also and still there is a problem that banks are not lending the money because of the tighter regulations in the financial market, that will lead to eventually less money in the market, and that will lead to decrease in money supply in the market. Now, in order to solve this dilemma and solve this paradox, there comes the regulation in terms of banking and regulation of money supply, which is primarily done by RBI in India. With this, we'll conclude today's topic, and this was saving diamond paradox, and this we discussed 3-4 important topics here. One was the marginal propensity to consume, marginal propensity to save. We also discussed one more important thing, that was multiplier effect. Multiplier effect of increase in income and increase in expenditure and decrease in consumption. One more thing which we discussed at the last was the paradox. Paradox of thrift. Okay? Very simple. Marginal propensity to consume says that if the income of a person is increasing, his capacity and capability to consume will also increase. Marginal propensity to save says that if the person's income is increasing, his inclination to save more will also increase. Now, if a person is consuming more or saving more, both the things will have impact on the macroeconomic level. How will this impact with there? If there is minor increase in consumption, it will lead to it will lead to a multiplier effect in terms of consumption. If there is minor increase in savings, this will lead to multiplier effect on expenditure and income also. Now, multiplier effect of income we have already read. These two we are discussing today. Once this is understood, then we need to see that how these savings in an economy will lead to more savings in the economy, will eventually lead to the output, the final, or at the national level, the savings will not actually increase. Rather, they will be stagnant or eventually will decrease. Why so? Because everyone will start saving, and if everyone is saving, then there will be lesser demand in the market and then consumption will decrease. Now, there should be a delicate balance between the savings and investments, both. And there should be a delicate balance between the income and expenditure. With this, we conclude